So here we are continuing on with the study into the Red Sea and the crossing of the Red Sea. And so just a little quick review of where we've been so far. The way this is being addressed is there's two basic views that are camps, kind of types of views being presented. There's the Egyptian view that says the crossing was at one of these shallow lakes or marshes up around the border of Egypt. And it wasn't, this massive miraculous thing. The Hebrew view says that no, it was across the Sinai over here at the Gulf of Aqaba. Excuse me. However, as we saw through several of the earlier studies, rather than nitpicking on the definitions and possible place names, is taking the view of looking at the pattern. Look at the overall picture of what happens in the scripture and what best fits it. And so it's kind of set up where there's 6 key events that are outlined in the Red Sea crossing. And we've taken a look at the first 4, maybe 3.5. The departure point, kind of direction they were going, the desert they crossed, and they end up taking this detour after they cross the desert. And so where was it that they departed from? Remember the name of the town? Ramses, also known as Avaris. And I was going to ask what direction were they headed, but there, I just gave you your cheat sheet there. In a southeasterly direction, right? We know they left from there, and we know that's the direction they were going. People disagree on what happened from that. People say that they crossed a desert, but which desert did they cross? Was it this little bitty one up here that's 12 miles across? Or was it this big one in blue that's about 150 miles across? I can't see that from here. Right, and we looked at the factors and the variables of which one would make the most sense, and we came to the conclusion it is not the little one, that it does appear to be saying they indeed crossed the big one. So where did they make their detour? We know where they started, we know the direction they were going, we know which wilderness they crossed. People say, no, they made this detour. That as they crossed the wilderness, they had to move out of the way. And the 2 options that are presented again are up here, right, just on the edge of Egypt, right, that they had to make a turn to avoid a military outpost by the people who were letting them go anyway. Or did they make a detour and get lost in the canyons and gorges and crags there in the mountainous area around Aqaba? Which one makes more sense? Right, not the little one up by Egypt. So that is roughly what we've covered. A lot of detail left behind. You can go back and see the previous lessons if you miss out on that. So now let's get into what we're going to be looking at tonight. Rather than getting into too much of the specifics about the crossing itself, we're going to kind of look at some build out of how you address it and how people think and why they think certain things and what the reasoning method that's being used is about why they're trying to find naturalistic explanations for miracles. And so we'll go ahead and watch this. I think it's about 20 minutes, and then we'll chat a little bit. Is it just my imagination, or do they get like a different director between the last, the part 1 and then this one? It's a little more artsy on this one. The music. I'm trying to figure out how they got that high definition video of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien sitting on a park bench talking. That's amazing. Where'd they get that from? A lot more artistic flair went into this one. It's interesting. So, okay. So God can do big things and he can do small things. And one thing that keeps getting revisited is that where you place the crossing is going to impact the size of the miracle, right? I mean, because if it's just some little marshy lake or canal over by Egypt, a little shallow body of water, not as big a deal. whereas if it's the Gulf of Aqaba, thousands of feet deep, pretty big deal. And so, however, even if we're able to kind of think up ways that something might make sense to us that we could be okay with, we shouldn't settle. We should actually strive to have our beliefs be what is true. And so one person that got quoted there, Deb Hearn, said that one reason scholars shifted the Exodus sea crossing to the shallow marsh lakes on Egypt's border was that scholars became uncomfortable with the patently supernatural. For the sake of anyone watching on video, I forgot to mention the actual video of the documentary will be edited out for possible copyright infringement. Links to where you can find it are in the description below. Okay, so people started abandoning the idea of some big supernatural thing because, well, the idea of a big, spectacular, miraculous event was making people uncomfortable. Something that's just blatantly supernatural. People were wanting natural explanations. One thing that is interesting, and I don't doubt it, is he said that, there are believers, like actual regenerate, born-again believers on both sides of this. And so it does appear, because my next question was going to be, is this attitude, apparent or even maybe even growing in the church? And I think the answer seems to be yes, because there are people who absolutely would name the name of Christ that I have no reason to doubt their sincerity of repentance and regeneration, but they tend to favor naturalistic things. What are some ways that maybe this idea has been growing in the church? What are some ways that you've seen people kind of shying away, maybe keeping the supernatural stuff at arm's length? Anything come to mind? Yeah, and and that's one thing that's really interesting, because I've heard apologist, author, I think it was Frank Turek, first person I heard say it. He asked audience, well, what's the biggest miracle in the Bible? People name a few different things. He goes, creation. Right? Creation is creating everything out of nothing. Well, if God can do that, every other miracle in the Bible is plausible. There's no reason to doubt it if you believe creation, and you have every reason to believe creation. Just a few ideas that I've seen in my studies. You have what's called the documentary hypothesis. That has to do with how the particularly the first 5 books of the Bible came about. Right? The traditional view, which I hold, is that Moses wrote them. There may have been some editing, along the way later on, but generally Moses wrote them. The documentary hypothesis says, no. There were actually at least 4, maybe 5, these multiple different writings that then editors later, like around the time of the exile, all kind of cobbled together into what we know now as the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And a lot of the motivation behind that is this kind of naturalistic. This arose back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, as this shift was going on towards the more naturalistic explanation. Well, wow, Moses couldn't have written that. It had to be something else, right? And so that's one thing. You mentioned the resurrection being a big one. And you think, hey, Christians, they got to believe the resurrection. Well, there's those in the church, more towards the liberal side, who say, well, maybe didn't like actual raise from the dead, that it was a vision. He appeared to them in a vision or in a dream or as an apparition, right? But it wasn't actually a bodily resurrection, right? There's people that try to claim that. There's, of course, the idea that God used evolution, right? That it wasn't, just that God didn't create, that he, used evolution to bring things about. I've heard this idea even from guys that I even tend to appreciate their work and scholarship, that your view needs to be a synthesis of the best biblical interpretation you can find and the best scientific theory. Why does it have to be based on the scientific theory? Believe what the Bible says, and then science needs to match that. That's my view. But then they say, no, we need to make sure that it's the natural explanation is also being considered and matched. I have a friend who has been doing research in deconversion, why people walk away from Christianity. And in the stories that he has studied, and he's done, I don't know how many at this point, he's working on his doctorate on this issue. He said the number one thing that people say why they doubted and walked away from the church has to do with the Bible or the teachings of the church contradicting science. Specifically, creationism gets brought up a lot, especially young earth creationism, but generally the idea that they see a contradiction between the Bible and science, and therefore the Bible loses. So a lot of this goes back to, as they were saying there in the video, this guy, David Hume, very influential scholar and philosopher a couple hundred years ago, who put forth a lot of the naturalistic ideas. He was one who was very influential in putting forth the idea that it's only what you can touch and see and directly observe that you can really know, right? And so that is obviously a point of view that is, I think, ingrained pretty deep in our culture. I think there's a lot of people that hold it, don't even give it a second thought. Even a lot of Christians kind of live their day-to-day life as practical atheists because they're not considering supernatural and spiritual things. They live their life as if the only things that matter is what you can see and touch and directly observe. So Hume said that miracles are violations of the laws of nature. And seeing how much he prizes naturalism and the natural order of things, right? You can see how a violation of the laws of nature would definitely be a negative thing for him. However, miracles aren't violations of the laws of nature per se. I would say more likely a better description would be they're interventions in nature. We all do it. If I drop this remote, what's going to happen? According to the laws of nature, it's going to fall to the floor. But if I put my hand in the way, oh, look, it didn't fall to the floor. It must be a miracle. No, I didn't violate a law of nature. I just intervened such to cause something else to happen. And so that's what God does. He intervenes such to cause something else to happen. One thing that I noticed, and it was almost like it was right at the tail end of like a cut in the video when it switched to some other scene. So I didn't catch it the first 2 times I watched this. He said that for Hume, he's not saying that miracles are impossible. He's just saying you shouldn't believe them because they're not empirically verifiable. So stop and think about it. According to this way of thinking, there's something that might be true, but you have to shut your mind off from considering it, is what he said. This worldview, this point of view of naturalism purposefully limits your ability to pursue truth wherever it may lead. You have to cut yourself off and say, no, I cannot consider anything over there. This guy here, a little quick short video, I think it's about 2 minutes long. This is Dr. William Lane Craig. This is an older video. Sound quality isn't the best. This is a little clip from a video from a debate that he had with a scientist on the issue of science, and that you can only know things that are scientifically provable came up, and this is his response.
Yes, I do deny that science.
So what count did it come from?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept. Let me list 5. Logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Metaphysical truths, like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with an appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Aesthetic judgments, number 4, cannot be accessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method. Science is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, in the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points A and B. But that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory.
But you're missing the whole.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah. Okay. So none of these beliefs can be scientifically proven, and yet they are accepted by all of us, and we're.
So that's just a little example that there's so many things in the world, in life, that it's not by science we know these things. And so it's actually absurd that you would cut yourself off from an entire body of knowledge and truth about the world by only limiting to what can be naturally, empirically verified and scientifically known. So, okay. He had a chat with a guy, and this was really interesting. I thought it was kind of, I like Eric Metaxas. Didn't really see his relevance to the topic. He's not an archaeologist or a historian or a biblical scholar or any of that, but smart guy, and has some good stuff. And he had a very insightful thing to say about why miracles happen. What was the thing that he said about, miracles and why miracles happen? Yeah. Yeah, the book plug. There you go. Right. Miracles serve a point beyond the blessing they bestow to the person. In just an example where it makes this pretty clear in Exodus 9:14, talking about the plagues, right? God delivering the plagues on Egypt. He says, "For at this time I will send all my plagues to your very heart and on your servants and on your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth." Right? Now, did he send the plagues to get Pharaoh to release the Israelites? And it was just, he was helping the Israelites. Oh, those poor Israelites are all oppressed and got, well, yes, that was part of it. But the way he did it and why he did it was to prove the point that everyone will know there is none like him. And especially whenever you consider that every single one of the plagues was a direct assault on the domain of an Egyptian deity. It showed that the God of Israel was more powerful than the gods of Egypt. And so the miracles were making a point. It was not just for their benefit. They were serving a deeper purpose. What's interesting is whenever you read in the Bible and you see where it says miracle, that's almost always a word that means something along the lines of sign or wonder or mighty work or portent. Right? The point being that God is showing something. He's not just performing it just to perform it. Right? The man that was born blind, and as Jesus' disciples asked, why was this man born blind? And Jesus said, so that the power of God could be shown, and then healed him. In the Old Testament, the words most frequently used for miracle are sign and wonder. And you see this, whenever you read the Bible and you stop and think about it, or you don't stop and think about it, it seems like there's just miracles all over the place. You got oceans parting, you got fire from heaven, you got guys being swallowed by fishes. I mean, you got just crazy stuff going on all over the place. Well, not really. The miracles are actually kind of grouped. I know you can't really read that, but this is a chart of that someone made of all the miracles and where they occur in the Bible. So the line at the bottom is actually the books of the Old Testament. And so you actually see that there's certain groupings of miracles. There's certain places and times where a greater number of miracles happen. This little spike right here at the beginning, that's the book of Genesis. What's going on in Genesis? Besides creation and the flood, there's some pretty big ones. Well, what is God doing through the book of Genesis? Who are the main characters in Genesis? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. God is revealing himself and preparing his people. He's revealing himself to the patriarchs. So the miraculous things that are going on is God showing himself to them. And then the big spike right there, that's Exodus. And the little one kind of next to it, grouped with it, is Numbers, because that all kind of has to do with Moses. Well, what's going on in Exodus and Moses? I mean, in Exodus and Numbers, Deuteronomy, all that, right? It's God revealing himself, showing himself, his might, his power to the Israelites, and giving them new revelation through Moses and establishing the new covenant. Right? So the miracles are there to show them, I am God. Next little group you got there is in the book of Joshua. What's going on in the book of Joshua? What's that? Taking the promised land. Right? And that's God showing his people, look, I'm fulfilling my promise. I told you this would be your land. Now I am delivering it to you. Right? So again, it's God showing them, telling them, teaching them. This little grouping there is throughout the book of Judges. What's going on throughout the book of Judges? Now, y'all should know this, because Dr. Krause recently did a study on it on Sunday nights. Yeah, where they would go astray, cry out to God, he'd deliver them, right? And so he's showing his faithfulness. Right? He's showing that I'm a God who's patient with you, I'm a God who loves you, I'm a God who will protect you. I'm faithful to the covenant I have made with you. This big one in 2 Kings, there's two prophets in particular in 2 Kings. They get talked about a lot. The people usually get their names mixed up. Which ones are those? Elijah and Elisha. What's going on during the history of Israel during 2 Kings? This will have been after Solomon, kingdom split, turning away from the Lord, worshiping other gods. Right? This is God, again, showing the people, I am the Lord your God. And so, pleading for them for repentance. And then way over here at the end, You got Daniel. What's going on in Daniel? Right. Well, what is God showing Daniel? What's he doing? What's the message he's revealing in Daniel? There's an end coming. There's going to be a day where I will be victorious. There's going to be a time when this all ends. So he's showing what the future holds. He's talking about the coming covenant, the coming Messiah, the new kingdom, everything going on. So he's making a point. He has new message. He has new revelation. Then in the New Testament, not surprisingly, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts. Well, what's going on in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts? Jesus comes and he's establishing his church. There is new revelation. So the miracles are the sign of the new revelation. All throughout the Old Testament, all those times and you saw those parts where there was a spike in miracles, it's because God was letting you know, this message is from me. Likewise, we're seeing this new covenant. It is from God. This message that these apostles are preaching, it is from God. And so you see over and over again that the miracles accompany a new message, a new lesson, a point that God is trying to make. He wants them to be seen, and he wants to make sure you know who did it. Always find it interesting whenever they come to Jericho. What does Rahab tell them? Well, why does she turn against her own people to help them out? She says, we've heard what your God did to the Egyptians, and I want no part of that. I'm with you guys. Well, do you think she would have that mindset if he had, used a wind to blow aside some shallow water and got some army stuck in the mud? Right? No, there was something spectacular that happened, and word got around. So, however, some people still want to think that natural explanations are preferable. So what are the two explanations that were given? There was one in particular, which I heard whenever I was in college, that the lady gave about the pillar, the smoke and the fire. Well, what did she say it was? Or could have been. Yeah. Well, I mean, if I don't know that it'd be big, but you're wandering around in the wilderness, pitch black. You're definitely seeing where the fire's at. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I remember hearing this, and the way my professor said, if it's a wagon, who's leading the wagon? Moses. Who's leading Moses? God. Well, okay, so God's leading the Israelites, so that was good enough for him. I'm like, not real sure there. What are some things that don't fit? What are some descriptions that don't fit this idea of the wagon? Yeah, you would think that, they're going to know. You got 2 million people, right? Yeah. I think the idea is that they would have like the big clay pots that it's in and burning, yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Whenever the Egyptians come, the fire moves and becomes a shield to keep yeah. Oh no, it's a wagon on fire. Run away, run away. Yep. What was the other one? This one I liked. This one I'm like, okay, what? That's kind of creative. And I can see how an ancient man might, be in awe and wonder over the other one. Right? What was the other? the volcano. You know? Yeah. Well, and yeah. Well, and this is one thing that I find, and we've talked about this before, the idea of chronological snobbery. You know, oh, well, those ancient superstitious people, they just didn't know any better. You think they didn't know what a volcano was and to stay away from it? You know? But, you know, let's, you know, give a little bit of credit. It does match some things. If you're over in Egypt and, you know, there's, you know, Sinai's, you know, got a volcano over there, you're seeing a pillar of cloud, you know, smoke in the distance and maybe some fire at night because you're able to see that. Right? It fit the fact that the lightning on the mountain, because volcanic ash and lightning, right? The trumpet sound, 150. Yep. Yeah. It's too far away. You're not going to see it. And by the way, they don't travel in a straight line. Okay, because they start out in Egypt and they kind of do a south, you know, kind of southeaster and then turn, you know, so, you know, they weren't following that. Then there's the fact that if the pillar of smoke and fire is what they are following, why do they turn? Yeah, it moved behind them and hey, oh, we got to go this way. Volcanoes don't move. Volcano with feet. And also, you know, like you'd mentioned that it moves behind and becomes a guard for them against the Egyptian army. Well, you know, that's not going to happen with a volcano. Maybe it erupted like through some rocks or something over there. There's actually a later instance where, you know, where after they build the tabernacle, the pillar of smoke is still there. It doesn't leave them. It still guides them throughout the 40 years of wandering. And whenever they stop and they erect the tabernacle, it hovers over the tabernacle. That can't be a volcano. It can't be a wagon. Yeah. Yeah, that whenever they had sacrifice, whenever Moses would go into the tabernacle, it would descend and, you know, cover the whole tabernacle because it's God coming down and meeting with Moses. That the fire would come consume sacrifice, and so, yeah, I mean, there's no naturalistic explanation that is matching that is making any kind of sense out of that. And see, this is one thing that really bugs me about the way a lot of people view this is so much of what you understand that you know, that you believe to be true, you didn't directly experience and learn that. You got it from a book. I've heard that, right? That more proof that Jesus existed than Caesar. I mean, there are for sure historical figures that, you know, are taken as fact, and what they did is taken as fact, that we have more, you know, about Jesus than them. I don't know if Caesar's one of them, but I know there's several. Well, yeah, and that's one thing, because it was common for, you know, kings to destroy records whenever they come in and conquer, because they're going to write the new histories, which is one reason why the spread of the church, because people were copying Bibles and taking them with them, and then copying and taking them with them, and translating them and taking them with them, so that even within the first couple hundred years, you have thousands of copies all over the place. There's no way that you could have squashed the Bible. There were too many. So, but yeah, lots of evidence for Jesus. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up this idea of evidence and needing evidence. Well, what's the natural explanation? Well, whether natural or not, there's this idea of needing evidence. Do you need evidence to have biblical faith? Oh, I've taught on this one several times. This should be easy. Is evidence needed for biblical faith? No? Yeah. I would say that it is the word faith, the word that the Bible translates, and whenever you read your Bible and it says faith, that Greek word is the word pistis. And it doesn't mean, blindly believing something. It means commitment and loyalty. It means to trust. And nobody trusts for no reason. Well, first off, trust has an object. You don't just trust. I just trust. You trust something or someone, right? You're trusting God, right? We have faith, trust in Jesus that he's going to save us, right? He is the object of our faith. Why do you trust? No one trusts for no reason. You can trust for bad reasons. You can trust for a little bit of reason. You can trust for a whole bunch of good reasons. But no one trusts for no reason at all. And God has given us reason. We have creation. And it blows my mind that people, I mean, if not absolutely nothing else, we know that God exists because we are here. And it is literally impossible for the universe to be past infinite. You cannot have a past infinite regress of time. Cannot happen, literally impossible. So we know there had to be a beginning. And if there's a beginning to space, time, and matter, well, that means that there had to be a cause outside of space, time, and matter that started the universe, which would have had to have been spaceless, timeless, immaterial. And it would have had to have been a person with a mind, because it would have actually had to be able to choose to create. And the only thing that has personal agency is, well, persons. So it would have been immensely powerful to be able to create. So just for the very fact that we exist at all, we know that there must be a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal mind that is immensely powerful enough to create a universe. I just described God. And you can go on and on into, because we know that there's morality, well, that's a feature of the universe, and then therefore this creator must be a moral being as well. And so we have God. He's given us that evidence, and then he has given us miracles. He has given us signs. He's given us wonders. And it is wrong of us intellectually, it is irrational of us to cut off ourselves from a whole range of knowledge about the world because we're going to go, oh, no, only science, only what's empirical, only what can be natural and touched. And I'm just like, if I can't prove it scientifically, then I'm just going to ignore it and I can't know it. Why would you close your mind like that? Instead, you look at the truth of reality of the world we live in that's bigger than just nature. We see a creation that demands there's a God, and we see that there are times where this God has given us signs and wonders of his power and his promise. And when God gives a sign, he makes sure that it is understood and that you know it was him that did it. Well, see, and I know people who are Christians, who, I mean, they're Bible believing, born again, love Jesus. They look back at the Exodus and like, well, okay, so the Nile turning to blood was actually this red algae, and the red algae made all the frogs leave the water, and they have all these explanations for all the plagues, and then they got this explanation, for the Exodus and for the for the parting of the whatever. It's like, okay, you're right. Even if all of those natural explanations were the way it happened, the fact that you had all of them stacking up in that order, in that way, at that time, in that place, that's a miracle. It's like I heard someone say, if evolution's true, it proves God, because it'd take a miracle to make it work. Yeah. So, okay, we're a little over time. Any final questions, thoughts? All right.